everyone. A warm welcome to all our virtual audience. As you know, tonight's program will be streamed live on Facebook. My name is Asha Maraj and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for the evening. India will be celebrating its 75th anniversary as an independent nation on the 15th of August 2022. In celebration of this, the High Commission of India, Trinidad and Tobago, with its cultural wing, the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Cultural Cooperation, will be honoring India in the 75 weeks leading up to its 75th Independence Day, hence India at 75. So, to kickstart our chain of events, we will be taking a trip down memory lane with Dr. Basdeo Panday and Dr. Radhika Mahes. The first item on our agenda will be brief remarks by His Excellency Mr. Arun Kumar Sahu, the High Commission of India, Trinidad and Tobago. A round of applause, please.
Honorable Dr. Basdeo Panday, the guest of the evening, Dr. Radhika Mahes, the moderator of the evening, guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the media. On 12th March 2021, Honorable Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, launched Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. In English, the auspicious celebration of independence, the government's initiative to mark 75 years of India's independence. This celebration will continue for 75 weeks and culminate on 15th August 2022. The celebrations are beginning in an atmosphere where India has demonstrated to be the world its adherence to the age-old tradition of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family through its vaccine diplomacy. Last year, amid the pandemic, India supplied medicines including hydroxychloroquine and paracetamol to 150 nations. All three countries I am accredited to as High Commissioner of India, namely Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, and Commonwealth Dominica, were supplied with these gifts. As scientists succeeded in finding a vaccine, our vaccine Maitri, vaccine friendship, began in the immediate neighborhood. Maldives, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, Mauritius, and Seychelles. Gradually, it got extended to the Gulf and smaller and more vulnerable nations from Africa to the Caribbean. Make in India vaccines have also entered into other countries, either bilaterally or through the COVAX initiative. To date, we have supplied made in India vaccines to 72 nations across geographies. In the Caribbean region, thank you. In the Caribbean region, we have donated 495,000 AstraZeneca vaccines to 10 island countries. It is of great satisfaction that the only vaccine that has come to this region, however small, is from India. The people of Indian ancestry are like branches of a banyan tree, both stems and roots. India's people and the government are incredibly proud of their success in all walks of life, including politics, administration, business, academics, medicine, engineering, literature, and service to their respective countries, irrespective of class, ethnicity, and faith. They are responsible and dignified citizens of their own countries. They speak about India because of their love and affection for their ancestral root and not political persuasion. We understand and appreciate their sentiments. It must be underlined that 21st century India is strong today and stronger tomorrow. And it does not employ mouthpieces to speak for it. India is a civilization of 5,000 years, the biggest democracy in the world with great diversity and pluralism. Our existence centrality is good governance and the welfare of its people and humanity's greater good. Memory today is an essential aspect of diaspora study and research. Memories establish a connection between a collective and individual, between the past and the present, and between heritage and history. Where do you come from? What made you what you are often questions that a member of a diaspora face. Usually, he has a double consciousness, secret knowledge, and perspective in consonance with migration and globalization. The Memory of India series is an attempt to capture this rich resource of knowledge. One of this series' objectives is to record the memories of people of Indian origin who have contributed to their country in a significant way. I sincerely believe that this digitization of memory will help current and future diaspora experts, historians, and migration study researchers. We are fortunate that the first of this series is hosting Dr. Basdeo Panday, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I also thank Dr. Radhika Mahesh for taking her time to act as a moderator. We hope that by the end of India's celebration at 75, we will have a sizable number of people and their interviews stored and shared digitally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wise words. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. I would now like to introduce the moderator for this evening and the interviewer of Dr. Panday. She is a senior lecturer in the field of history who has a PhD in history from the University of West Indies. She was a Commonwealth visiting scholar in the history of medicine at the University of Manchester, Center for the History of Science, Technology, and Medicine. She also possesses a Master of Arts in Modern Indian History at JNU, New Delhi, India. I now hand you over to Dr. Radhika Mahesh, who will be our moderator for this evening and Dr. Panday's interviewer. A round of applause, please.
High Commissioner of India, His Excellency Mr. Arun Kumar Sahu, distinguished guest Mr. Basdeo Panday, ladies and gentlemen, Namaste, Sitaram, Assalamu Alaikum, a pleasant good afternoon to all of you. I am very honored to present our distinguished guest, Mr. Basdeo Panday, to share his memories of India with us today. Really, he needs no introduction. He said that his career has been a series of accidents, as he has never set out to pursue a career in politics, yet he became the first Indo-Trinbagonian Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Basdeo Panday, the descendant of Indian indentured laborers, was born on May 25, 1933 in St. Julian, a rural village on the outskirts of Princestown. He attended New Grant Government and St. Julian Canadian Mission School and then Presentation College, San Fernando. He obtained degrees in law at Lincoln's Inn, London, in economics at London University, and drama at London School of Dramatic Art. He has rendered invaluable service to Trinidad and Tobago in various portfolios, as the 5th Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, as the leader of the opposition, as Member of Parliament, as opposition senator, as head of various ministries, also as President General of the All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union, and of course, as political leader of the United National Congress. And I can go on and on. Mr. Panday now serves as the Chief Administrator of the Basdeo Panday Foundation, a charitable organization situated at Rienzi Complex. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Basdeo Panday.
Namaste. Sitaram. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Your Excellency Arun Kumar Sanu, the High Commissioner of India to Trinidad and Tobago, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I wish first of all to congratulate His Excellency, the High Commissioner, for his initiative in organizing this forum. It will certainly help in removing many of the propaganda and misunderstandings of Indians in India and misunderstandings of the Indians in the diaspora. To many of those who reside in the Western world, India has always been a mysterious enigma, shrouded in ancient rites and practices, perpetually poverty-stricken and no longer relevant to the modern world. This propaganda has been perpetuated by ignorance in some cases, and in others by the fear of competition among manufacturing giants of the West. Some have seen only the glory of India. Others have seen only the glory. I have been fortunate to experience both. I first visited India when, as Prime Minister, Oma and I were invited as chief guests of the Indian government at its anniversary celebrations in 1997. The ceremony was awesome. I was struck by the huge number of military personnel decked in beautiful colors, marching with disciplined precision and poise as MiG fighters flew ahead. I was overcome by a tremendous sense of pride, as I believe most migrants are when they see the country of their religion excel in the world. During our stay in Delhi on that occasion, we were accommodated at one of the suites at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, otherwise known as the President Palace in New Delhi, a huge building which consists of some 340 rooms on 320 acres of land. On that occasion, the Indian government was more than generous when it provided me with a helicopter, complete with security guards and other military personnel, so that I may visit a remote village called Azamgarh in Lachmanpur in Uttar Pradesh, from which my maternal grandparents migrated when they came to Trinidad in 1917. There was no helipad or other place in this remote village where the copter could land. So the villagers provided and prepared a portion of land on which the helicopter could alight. As the helicopter approached the landing area, I could see from above hundreds of people below running towards the makeshift helipad along wide open banks of land, which were probably used to either divide the holding into portions or to contain water therein. Something like what we call the Marys in our lagoon, but only much bigger. As we approached the makeshift helipad, I could hear thunderous shouts coming from below. Panday ki jai, Panday ki jai. It was truly a humbling experience. On landing, I was led on foot to the place where my Nana and Nani lived when they left India. The small mud hut in which they lived, and which I suspect was recently repaid, was still there. Oma and I greeted the family and presented them with gifts. And as we embraced one another, the entire scene was so emotional that even the security guards were crying. During that visit, I also was fortunate to have a personal meeting with Sai Baba at his ashram in Puttaparthi. I was struck by the enormity of the humanitarian and social work performed by the efforts of His Holiness. His organization had built a huge hospital where the sick could be attended to without cost by highly skilled personnel, both local and from abroad. He had also built a water project to provide water for thousands of villagers. I was so impressed with the amount of facilities Sai Baba, who had no political power, was able to provide for the poor and the needy, that I felt powerless in his presence. And when we were in our private session, I said, Baba, forgive me for asking you this question. But I am the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm supposed to have power. You have no such power. And yet you have been able to provide so much to ease the suffering of the poor and the powerless. I felt so inadequate. I was beginning to wonder. So when I met him, I said, Baba, may I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, I feel so inadequate. I have no power and I have power and you have no power and you can provide so much. Should I continue in politics? And he said, in his usual way, go back and finish the work you have to do. On another occasion, I had the privilege of visiting the shrine of Shirdi Baba in Shirdi, a most awe-inspiring experience. I recall on one occasion when we were driving through Mumbai, our vehicle encountered a huge traffic jam and had to be diverted to another route. When I inquired as to what was the problem, I was told that it was a celebration of a Christian gathering on one of its festive occasions, attended by thousands of people. I realized that India is a multiracial, multicultural, multi-religious country. There are over 207 million Muslims living in India, and one can find mosques everywhere. Could I have some water? Could I have some water? You see, since I left politics and speaking all over the place, I'm beginning to lose my voice. Thank you very much. As I said, there are 270 million Muslims living in India, and one can find mosques everywhere. Many of the top movie stars and acclaimed musicians in India are Muslims. You have only to go to the YouTube or Coke studio for direct evidence of this. In addition to Hindus, Muslims, there are also thriving communities in India of Christianity, Sikhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and people of the Baha'i faith. I even made friends with an Indian person who told me that he was a follower of the Syrian Orthodox faith. The color of his skin was coal black. And I wondered, how would he be classified in Trinidad? The second occasion on which I visited India was an official one, when I was invited by the Indian government to attend the Pravasi Bharatya Divas, where I was awarded the Bharatya Saman Award. And on that occasion, the agenda was not as strict and as formal as it was in 1997. I was able to visit the Taj Mahal and other places of historical significance. The architectural beauty of the Taj has got to be seen to be believed. It is not possible for me to describe it. I am sure you have seen many photographs of it in the media. What more can I say of this unbelievable monumental structure? As I looked at it, I can only think of the words, "Love is indeed a many-splendid thing." There are so many temples in India that it will take a lifetime for me to visit them all. We visited many of them and other holy places in the country. India is a country steeped in religiosity. On that occasion, I was invited by the University of Benares, where an honorary doctorate was conferred upon me. In 2016, I was invited by the government of Uttar Pradesh on the occasion of the celebration of its own Bharatya Pravas, which was held in that state. And again, I was able to visit many temples of historical importance. Between those visits, I visited India on a few occasions privately through the generosity of the former Indian High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Inder Veer Chopra, and his wife Nanita, whom we call Nani, much to her displeasure. We became friends because of our mutual love for golf while he served here, and remained so after he demitted office and returned to private life in Pune. On the occasion of their son's wedding, I was invited to attend the marriage ceremony of their son Dhruv, which was held in New Delhi, and that was an experience. The groom, decked in what appeared to be royal robes, arrived at the mandir where the ceremony was being held, riding on a white horse, followed by a musical band and his entourage. Many of the ancient customs and rituals still persist in India today. The wedding ceremony contained some of the same practices we have in Hindu marriages in Trinidad. I wondered why in Trinidad we left out the horse. India probably has the greatest variety of scenic beauty in the world, from the snow-capped Himalayan majesty in the north to the calm, soothing southern waters of Cochin in Kerala. A trip on one of their houseboats along a lake of cool, dark green waters was most relaxing and enjoyable. There I visited a place called Tiruvananthapuram. I will never forget that name, not only because I was the only person in the group who could pronounce it, I was also the only person who could spell it. In Kerala, there are not only many houses of worship, but also many institutions of higher learning. I was told that Kerala had the highest literacy rate in all of India. Eventually, I reached Tamil Nadu, which was on the southernmost tip of India, and its uniqueness lies in the fact that it is where there is a confidence of the Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal, and the Indian Ocean. Because of its unique location, I was told that it is the only place in the world where one can witness the sunrise and the sunset at the same time. I was reminded of a comparable miniature temple in the sea when I saw the huge temples miles off the coast of Kanyakumari. There was still a large boat perched high on the mountainside by the fury of the tsunami which took place around that time. In Pune, I visited an agricultural research center, which was engaged in the experimentation of new ways and means to improve on a constant basis the development of new seeds, varieties, modern scientific methods in agriculture. The result of this and many institutions in India resulted in what became known as India's Green Revolution. I began to understand why, from being a country wreaked in famine only a few years ago, India today can not only feed herself, but has become an exporter of many agricultural products. I was surprised to find out that mango was the national fruit of India, but it also constitutes a thriving multi-million industry for both local consumption and markets abroad. It was the visit to Vrindavan, the place where Lord Krishna and his childhood with Radha spent time, and it is a place that gives you goose pimples. On entering the grove, we were advised by the caretakers to take off our glasses, spectacles, especially because the monkeys roamed that grove, and there were many of them, had a love for snatching the spectacles of visitors. I never found out why and how they came to develop a love for glasses. The one that I thought was most unique was in Maharashtra, where there's an Indian temple built inside the bowels of a mountain. It is called the Kailash Temple. We were told that the temple was chiseled by hand and took more than 20 years under the reign of several leaders to construct. What is incomprehensible is that how was it possible, having regard to our perception of technology at the time, for them to do such a thing? There is much speculation as to when the temple was built or who built it. What is clear is that it was built. What is clear is that when it was built, the level of technology was far greater than we have taught to believe. So far, I have seen some of the glories of India. I did not want to have a one-sided view, so Oma and I decided to pay a visit to the streets where the real action took place. We decided on the streets of the Kolaba in Mumbai. The street markets are mind-boggling. Vendors line the streets with an endless variety of goods and imaginable types of description, antiques, trinkets, clothes, even pan with a red and white substance on it served on little white leaves. There are shoes and musical instruments, and what seemed to me to be a used propeller of an aeroplane. I say that to indicate to you the variety of things that were there. I almost bought a second-hand trumpet. I was always fascinated by musical instruments. There was one incident which was scary. I had separated from my group when a young lady, frail, dressed in rags, ragged clothes, with a baby in her arms, came to me and said, "Baby, baby, milk, milk." I offered her a few rupees, but she refused, saying, "Milk, milk, baby, baby, come, milk." So I began to follow her down the street, and she began walking faster and faster. I thought she was leading me to where the baby's milk was. I was following her and the baby when someone from our group grabbed me by the shirt tail, pulled me back, and made me stop. I was not only rebuked by my friends for my naivety and stupidity, and almost falling into a trap which they said I was being led to be robbed. While in Kerala, a few of us hired a vehicle to take us on a tour of the city. After a long day, we were on our way back to the hotel when someone from the group suggested that it would be a good idea to have a glass of wine. So we told the driver, stop off at a wine bar or wine shop where we could purchase a bottle of wine. We noticed that the driver was passing many of the shops, but would not stop. When we asked him why he was doing that, he pretended not to understand what we were saying. We later discovered that he was a teetotaler, and his religion was against the drinking of alcohol of any kind. It would appear that by not stopping us, he was saving us from committing a grievous sin. There is another striking thing about India that is very noticeable. Whether it was the hotels, the shops, the bazaars, the streets, the people were always active, always doing something, never standing still, seeking and inventing ways and means of making a living. Wherever you went, people were very busy. There was activity everywhere. But the most amazing experience I had was in Mumbai. Traveling in a motor vehicle, we came upon a roundabout. Nobody stops at the roundabout in that traffic. Yet, the traffic keeps moving. It is a never-ending miracle. And I didn't witness any traffic incidents. I can go on and on relating other incidents, occurrences, some awesome, some funny, some amazing. But it would be of no avail, because India cannot be explained. India has to be experienced. Thank you.
So thank you, sir, for sharing those beautiful memories with us. We are going to have an open discussion followed by a question and answer session, because I'm pretty sure that there are lots of persons in the audience who have some very interesting questions to ask you. But I want to start off by asking you, you grew up in a Hindu home. Did you grow up with a concept of India? Did you hear your parents or grandparents speaking to you about India or speaking about India?
I never thought of India as such, but my parents spoke Hindi. My mother's mother and father came from India in 1917. And India never really occurred to me as a country. In any case, being a young boy in St. Julian, running barefoot all over the place, you hardly thought of such things.
Why did you decide to trace your roots?
I believe, I can't remember whether I raised the topic with Shamsuddin,
Shadeen,
a
yeah.
tremendous person who's doing great work in finding the relatives of people in India.
Yes,
But some of us raised it, and he decided that he would be the person who would do the investigation and so on.
But did you have documentation of your grandparents when they came?
Yes. What I think he did is that, I knew the name of my grandfather, and I knew the name of my grandmother. And I gave him those names, and I think he went to the archives somewhere and found their names and found the ship on which they came and the year they came and so on. And it is from there, I believe, that he began tracing backwards.
So let's talk about that visit you made in January 1997. You visited as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. What did you hope to achieve from, to visit India as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago? What were your expectations?
Well, I don't think I expected anything. I was the Prime Minister, I was invited by the government officially, and I would expect to see a lot of ceremonies and that sort of thing, and see some of India. I didn't think I had anything specific in mind that I wanted or expected to see.
Did you want to establish closer ties between Trinidad and Tobago and India?
Well, I hope that that would be a natural consequence of my visiting India, that there will be a closer tie between the two countries.
Yes. So you grew up again in a Hindu home. Were there certain philosophies and beliefs that influenced you as a person, as an individual growing up throughout your life?
Well, my mother and father were Hindus, and they used to have their prayers and so on in the village. The village was occupied mostly by Indians, although there were people of African descent there as well. And they would have their Ram Leela, and they would have their other functions and so on, which they had brought from India. There was also music, which also they had brought. And there was that natural link between the descendants of Indians and that milieu.
I'm getting the idea that, it was so much a part of your life that you didn't really separate it.
That's right. That's right. One didn't segregate it in any way.
Yeah.
It just was something that naturally flowed from being in a village where things like that took place.
Were you influenced by any Indian personalities such as Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru? Did they influence you in your politics and your style?
Well, first of all, I didn't even know about them. That is, living in a village where in my days you don't have newspapers or radio or anything like that. Things like that don't come to your notice. It is when I began entering politics and when I began looking at the world that India became of interest. And people like Gandhi, who was a tremendous person, gave his life for India. And there was Jawaharlal Nehru, and a lot of great Indians that began to come to my notice at that time.
I read in a biography written by John Laguerre that you had gotten a scholarship, a Commonwealth scholarship, to study at the Delhi School of Economics. What happened with that?
After I did my degree in economics, I'd got a scholarship to go to Delhi School of Economics to do a PhD in political science. But I thought that I would come home to see my parents. I'd been in England for so long. I thought I'd come home to see my parents before I go. And when I came to Trinidad, I found that there was tremendous struggle taking place. The workers and Stephen Barrage and the Butler Party and so on, they were campaigning against the introduction by Dr. Eric Williams of the Industrial Stabilization Act, which they regarded as a piece of anti-labor legislation. And I made the mistake of going to one of their meetings. And having gone to one of their meetings, it's a long story that followed after that with Stephen Barrage and others. And I was persuaded that I had enough education and that I should stay and join the struggle upon which they were engaged, which was for poor working class people. And I did.
And everything after that is history.
Everything after that just flowed on its own.
Okay, I know that some members of our audience have questions that they would like to ask, so I am now going to open the floor. I am asking that you keep your questions short and direct. Just identify yourself when you want to speak. I think there is someone with a mic. Yes. Okay, so just raise your hand and someone will come to you with a mic. The mic. Oh, she's saying you can take it off. Yeah?
Hi, Commissioner.
Okay.
I'm David Goldstein, Honorable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, and our interviewer. I'd just like to add two little things to what you said. Mumbai is the only city in the world with a Hajj center.
With that?
A Hajj center. People come from all over India and they stay there and live there for a month waiting for a flight to Hajj in Saudi Arabia. And it's something we should observe. Another thing, in one of my tours through the Parliament building, it was mentioned, and maybe the High Commissioner can clarify, if not verify it, that when they were building that building in Mumbai, the mission behind the British government at that time, behind the head, was to build a center for the great empire out of England. It's equidistant between Australia and London, about 7,000 miles, because the mighty British Empire thought that they will occupy everything between Australia and England until Gandhiji came and cut that dream short. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there anyone else who has a question? I have a question.
Sure.
So today, present times, what kind of relationship we would like to see between Trinidad and Tobago and India, now and in the future?
I think that Trinidad and Tobago has a lot to learn from India. And the first thing is really being busy about doing something in order to earn a living. And the Indians are very inventive. They invent things, ways of living and so on. But more than that, India has become very efficient in technology. A lot of technology. Solar energy.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to remember. Solar energy. agriculture. There's a tremendous amount to learn because there are so many places in India with climatic conditions similar to that of Trinidad. And so I think we could benefit enormously by getting assistance with respect to things like that.
But you know, so much of our younger generation growing up now, they don't have that kind of close connection to Indian and to some extent to even Indian culture here in Trinidad, because there's been that whole socialization process. And what do you think about that?
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
They are living in Trinidad. They are being swamped and surrounded day after day by a new kind of culture. And it's bound to seep into their psyche sooner or later. I think it happens to most people in the diaspora, where they begin to absorb what is called the local culture. And I don't think that Indians in Trinidad will escape from that.
It is inevitable. Okay, let's go back to our audience. I'm seeing a hand raised.
Thank you. Evening, Excellency, Dr. Panday, Dr. Mahays, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I was reading 2 days ago in the papers about a new book that's out that talks a lot about racism and the role of the Indian community. Monday is the International Day for the Elimination of Racism. And that was my article in The Guardian this week. And reading that article about the gentleman who wrote that book, stating that, of course, a lot of the problem relates to how Indians behave. I'm a Douglas, so, you know, I'm trying to eliminate racism in here, but in the world as well. What strategies do you think we need to employ to address this issue? You know, because it's not going away and it's not helping us to build society, to build a common good. And we really need to do something. So with your years of wisdom, share your strategy.
The specific issue you're referring to is?
What strategies do you have to help us in Trinidad and Tobago to eliminate racism?
Oh, I see. Fine. What has got to happen is that, first of all, we must develop a system by which people are treated equally. That's the first thing. And that takes a lot of doing. It takes, for example, a change in the political system. I've been advocating change in the Constitution for a very, very long time. We have a government which we inherited from the British. And I remember I was criticizing some government or the other, and somebody said, but why are you criticizing the Westminster system that we inherited from the British? It works for the British. And I said, it works for the British because they are British, and it doesn't work for us because we are not. We do not have the same ethos, the same way of dealing things. So that what we need to do in order to really end all of this is really to develop a constitution that is relevant to our own society and not England or America or anywhere else. We may copy bits and pieces from them and so on where it's relevant. But most important is that we have to develop a political system in which governments are accountable, they are not allowed to discriminate, people are treated fairly, there are sanctions for those who disobey that kind of behavior. It's an enormous task, but it has to start with politically, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much for that. I'm seeing a hand up at the back.
Mr. Panday, Trinidad has always had a very good relationship with the government and people of India. culturally, socially, religiously, economically. Even our sportsmen, not only in Trinidad, in the West Indies, have become millionaires in India because of the IPL. And Indian cricket is very much admired and respected throughout the world. As a former Prime Minister, how do you feel that our present Prime Minister is not taking advantage of getting the coronavirus for the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Actually, I propose to ask people from the High Commission that question. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. Truly, my brother, I don't know the answer. People believe that there are racial overtones or undertones in this COVID virus thing with Trinidad. I don't know. I don't know the facts, and therefore I really ought not to comment. I cannot comment. But I don't want to put anybody in a difficult position, but I understand. I understand. Protocol demands that the High Commissioner of a country doesn't get into a fight with the head of the country and so on. And I imagine how difficult his position must be.
So if you were Prime Minister now, how would you treat with this whole vaccine issue?
If I were president?
If you were Prime Minister now,
If I were Prime Minister at this time?
Yeah. How would you treat with the whole vaccine issue?
Well, first thing I'd do is I'd make sure I got information that the vaccine, we were getting some free. And having got some free, then I would follow the rest of the requirements that we get some free on condition that we order some later on and so on. But I don't know. I don't know what the facts are. Somebody asked me, well, what do I think of the fact that the government has rejected the Indian vaccine? And the only thing that could come to my mind is that India will have more to vaccinate its own people and so save more lives in India. That's the only thing I can think of.
True. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Panday? Yeah.
Mr. Panday, my impression is that I'm coming back to the question of constitution reform. My impression is that successive governments, they are aware and they know that the system, the current system, is not working in the interest of the country, the best interest of the country. And as a result of that, all kinds of impediments create the kinds of frustration that we continue to experience. You have been advocating constitution reform for the longest while. And I am of the opinion that your call is not getting any kind of traction, despite the fact that it is a genuine one, and more than that, most necessary. Is it that we will have to go out of Trinidad and Tobago to get the attention of the powers that be? For example, can we go to the Commonwealth of Nations and tell them to assist us to generate interest in constitution reform, or where else can we go? You are a past prime minister of this country, and as one who continues or ought to have the respect and the regard of the population, why is it we are not having the kind of response? Because no one can deny that we are stuck simply because the system is not working. Can we go a little bit ahead of where you are, calling for constitution reform, and perhaps float an idea or ideas as to what can we do in order to generate interest in that direction of constitution reform?
It takes a politician to get another politician sucked into a political argument, doesn't it? Anyway. First of all, appealing to the Commonwealth countries and so on will not help. The reason being that internationally it is recognized that one country does not interfere in the internal affairs of another country. So that, I think, Council is out. Our problem is that we have a constitution, and because of the racial divide in the country, neither wants political change. In order to change the constitution of this country, you need to have two-thirds, three-quarters majority of the votes in Parliament. But neither the government nor the opposition wants to change the political system because it suits them. It makes life easy for them, so they don't want to change. There are only 3 prime ministers in our independence history that had the required number of votes in order to change the constitution. There were Eric Williams, A.N.R. Robinson, and Kamala Persad-Bissessar. Eric Williams changed the constitution and introduced the Republican Constitution, but it was a change only of form, not of substance. The old system remained. I was going to say something again. Council, the only other thing I think that can be done is to mobilize the people. But how do you mobilize a country that's so racially divided, and not only divided along race? People think this country is only divided along race. It's not, you know. It's divided along class. There's race and class divisions in the society. And the only answer is to mobilize the people, to put enough pressure upon the government to change. As far as I'm aware, when people truthfully and honestly and desperately deserves or requires constitutional reform, they either get it in one of 2 ways: by peaceful means or by violent means. History is replete with examples of countries where people were denied the right for constitutional change, resorted to violence. The tragedy is, in Trinidad, because of the division of its peoples, that kind of struggle will be a disaster. So we have to find other means. Council, I don't know the answer.
I am in full agreement with you that when we are so stifled, we will reach the point of utter frustration, and there can be a spillover into violence. Now, people in public forums, and perhaps a forum like this, would, if they were close enough to me, they would say, don't talk this violence talk and so on. But it is there simmering, Mr. Panday. The fact of the matter is, because the system is not working, the frustration is building. And one can feel in the atmosphere that the frustration is everywhere. We are pointing at different situations, different institutions, without being bold enough to say that the situation, I beg your pardon, the institutions have collapsed. And as a result of that, the state is collapsing. And more than that, we seem not to understand, to our own detriment, the urgency of the matter regarding the direction in which we are heading. And that is what prompted me to ask you the question in the first place, because I believe that the contribution that Mr. Basdeo Panday still has to make in this society is to continue to advocate. I can't say agitate, perhaps advocate is the right word. Advocate the need for constitution reform. And to my mind, if we do not move in a direction to facilitate that, it means that it is only a matter of time.
Council, you know you're right when you say the society is deteriorating, all the institutions are breaking down and so on. And when that happens, it is spiraling downwards. And sooner or later, we are going to hit rock bottom. And when we hit rock bottom, out of the ashes a phoenix will rise. The tragedy is that phoenix is usually a dictator. You're raising some extremely important points, but you're sucking me into politics again.
Okay, there's a gentleman across here who has been waiting for a while to ask a question. Please go ahead.
Yes. His Excellency, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Basdeo Panday, and moderator, Ms. Mahis. My name is Oliver Alexander from Miaro, and I sit here, I listen about solar, which is the future, with medicine, which India is high on, and technology. Now, I want to go back to my community and tell the young people about these three things that we about India. But would they believe me and say, listen, Alexander, would you be the person who to lead this charge for us to believe in for the young people who are the future? Or just let Mr. Panday say that, and that's it. Who's going to say it?
If you organize a meeting, I'll come and address it. But
sure.
You have to organize. But you have to organize a meeting.
You know, it will happen. Thank you.
I'll come. I mean it.
Is there any other question? Right there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. Oh, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, Sitaram to one and all, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and the moderator, Dr. Mahis. I want to bring back the conversation back onto memories of India. First of all, former Prime Minister, thank you very, very much for sharing your wonderful memories of India. I am sure that thousands of people from Trinidad and Tobago have visited India also. And yet I assume there are thousands. It only becomes a dream to them because the cost would be very high.
Sure.
Your memories here this evening, I am sure through Dr. Mahes, it will remain history forever and ever and ever. So the younger generation will not only hear about it, but feel it to know what our motherland is about. Another one of my questions to you is not really a question, but I must thank you, is when Dr. Mahes asked you that when you were small and if your parents spoke about India, you know, it brings back a very great memory to me, because my Aji and Aja came from India. And I remember clearly my father would sit in the garden and he would face east. And looking eastward, he would always say, I wonder what India is like where my father and mother, and you know, it only became a dream. They died, my parents, and they never reached there. But once again, thank you very much for sharing memories of India.
My
To
pleasure.
us and to the whole world. Thank you.
My pleasure, thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's get back to India. Let's talk about India. You said you made quite a few trips. You've been several times.
Yes.
Is there any one memory that really stands out? Is there something that you know you would always remember?
As I said in the concluding statement that I made, India cannot be explained. India cannot be understood. India can only be experienced. So that I go, I see lots of wonderful things. But one thing that sticks out in my now that you talk about it, is that temple that they carved inside the bowels of a mountain. There is a temple in the bowels of a mountain, huge temple, and there are several of them. I think the Indian government has closed down a few of them to preserve them, and have had allowed only one to be accessible, which was the one I was able to go into. And I think that marveled me more than anything else, to know that we always thought that these people had bow and arrow and so on and that sort of thing, and that they had wooden axes, stone axes and that sort of thing. How did they build a temple inside the mountain? You know, in India, there are actually speculations that it was built by aliens. No, seriously, incomprehensible is this fact of a temple inside a mountain built over a period of 20, 30 years under the rulership of several rulers. But they did it. I think it's a marvel. I think it's a wonder of the world, actually.
Yeah. Was there anything that you experienced there that you felt, that you didn't really like too much?
No, as I say, India is not unique in the sense that everything there is honky-dory and everything there is good. There are wicked people as well as good people all over the world. There are poor people as well as rich people all over the world. No, I don't think that there is anything that sticks about India. As I say, India is an experience. You can't seem to identify anything. You just feel it.
Did you feel a sense of identity and of belonging when you visited?
Yes. Yes, I did. And I felt very proud. For example, when I attended the independence celebration, the display, the military display of all the soldiers and things, it's extremely impressive. I could go on talking all evening about the things that impressed me. Everything stands out. That's a difficult way to explain it, but everything stands out.
You know, and here in Trinidad and Tobago, we have that rich cultural legacy that our forefathers brought with them. What would be your advice to the younger generations coming up regarding that cultural, you know, that whole legacy that has been brought?
Well, those who could visit India should visit India, and those who can't should read about it. There are lots of stuff on the internet and so on, and one can familiarize themselves with all kinds of things. For example, the one I told you about attending this wedding on a horse. Apparently, that's an ancient thing where the Maharajas and so on would go. And he was dressed in royal clothes, clothes that look royal, and riding a white horse and that sort of thing. We can read about these things. We can read about the ancient customs and adapt those which are relevant to our modern day living. I think that is the way to go.
And I just want to ask again before I go back to the audience, you know, Mr. Shamsuddin traced your roots. Did you get the chance to visit any of your relatives in India or any of your ancestral
Not after
villages?
that, no.
No, okay. So I'll just go back to the audience. We still have time for a couple of questions. There's...
Mr. Prime Minister.
Don't let Rowley hear you.
You know, a friend of mine in the US tells me, if a past president enters a room, you address him as Mr. President. If it's Bill Clinton, George Bush, even Mr. Obama.
That's America, this Trinidad. But go ahead.
I want to say something about India,
Sure.
which was an eye-opener for me. Several years ago, I was in Chicago, Illinois, to visit Northwestern University. And I had to pass through a town called Skokie. Outside Israel, Skokie had the highest concentration of Jewish people in the world. Every other corner had a synagogue. If you had to draw an analogy how Skokie looks like, take a drive through Gulf View, but there are synagogues there. As a Trinidadian who never experienced the Hebrew religion, I was very curious to what a synagogue looks like inside. And I stopped by one, and apparently it was prayer time for these people. So, like a curious Trinidadian, I decided to mingle with the crowd and follow them inside. And I was looking to see what the seating arrangements were like. Very much like a mosque where men and women are segregated. In this synagogue, men were downstairs and the women were upstairs. And I realized that you couldn't even look upstairs. You had to keep your eyes straight to the rabbi. While I was sitting, someone stuck a yarmulke, which is what the Jews wear, on my head. And the ceremony continued. When it ended, and I was ready to leave, I wanted to meet the rabbi because I never met a rabbi in my life. Everyone was staring at me because I was the only person of color. And I met the rabbi, and he asked me if I'm from India. So, of course, I had to explain to him that India is the land of my ancestors and give him the story of 1845. He said to me, I want you to know something, son. My people, my community, the Jews, have suffered every level of prejudice and racism in the world. And he referenced the Holocaust as well. He said, to this day, we still struggle. But there is one country in the world that stands out that never practiced anti-Semitism. I said, would you please, Rabbi, tell me the name of that country? He said, India. He said, India. And then he told me Jews have been living in India for approximately 2,000 years. Well, I found that a little hard to swallow at that time. But he said to me also that one thing that Hinduism and Judaism have in common is that those are the two oldest religions in the world. And it's religions that do not posterate or go out looking for converts. It's the nature of the culture of how it evolved. I'm not going to comment on it, but that's basically what I wanted to say. But there was also something I wanted to say to you as well, because I will never have the opportunity, or I don't know if I'll ever have the opportunity to say it again. I have a LinkedIn friend, her name is Erin, and she likes politics. And on LinkedIn, I told her a bit about you. And I don't have to get into details, but I spoke about the 2001-2002 era, and you know what I'm referring to. And her question to me is is Mr. Panday still standing? And I said emphatically yes. Ever so often, she does send me a note, how is Mr. Panday, how is he faring? So what I want to say to you as a citizen of this country, and I'm quoting the words of the wife of George Washington, Martha Washington, when she attended to the soldiers fighting the War of Independence in hospital. Mr. Panday, thank you for your service. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, could we give him a round of applause, please? And in many respects, I just want to share with you just a quote, and I will end there, by one of your favorite authors, Ernest Hemingway. He says, "The world breaks us, and afterwards, some of us become strong at the broken places."
Sure.
Mr. Panday, you are strong at the broken places. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, there was someone else with their hand up.
His Excellency and Trinidad and Tobago's best Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Panday, moderator. Mr. Panday, I'm sure there will be very many more political questions that will be posed to you, but I just want to refer back to this situation regarding memories of India. I don't know if you may have experienced this, or probably if my experience might have been a bit different from yours. In Trinidad and Tobago, I have always asked myself, why do us Indo-Trinidadians tolerate and put up as much as we do, given the problems that we are faced? And it is only that my visit of India would have probably give me an answer to that. I don't know if you may have had a similar experience, but I would like to hear from you eventually. And let me qualify by saying, the reason why I said so is, like you said, at the roundabout, vehicles all over the place, cattle all over the place, people all over the place. For me, it was organized chaos. We're going up the highway one way, I see a vehicle coming down the other way. No cussing, no quarreling, no fighting or anything of that nature. And I left India with an experience that told me that I could today understand why Indians are so tolerant. After that experience, I couldn't understand. Well, prior to that, I could never understand why we tolerate all that we tolerate in this country. But to be honest, you having left there, I think that's the reason why we are tolerant. It's probably in our genes. Can you share with me your experience similar to that, if at all? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that? Okay, to follow on what the gentleman was saying, between 1845 and 1917, we had 147,900 indented laborers who came here to Trinidad. And they were mainly employed on the sugarcane plantations. They built the sugar industry and sugar on the whole in Trinidad and Tobago. And later on, you became the president of the All Sugar General Trade Union Workers. How was that experience? What did that mean to you to be fighting for and on behalf of these, sugar workers who came out of that legacy that came with the indented laborers?
I didn't plan anything. Well, I just got sucked into things. When I came back here, there I was with George Weeks and CLR James and all these trade unionists. We got together fighting against the Industrial Stabilization Act. We decided we were going to have a march for peace, bread, and justice. You remember that march? And the government sent down their armed forces and beat us up and that sort of thing. A lot of us land up in jail and in prison and so on. And what I did at that time is that I told my colleagues that you see what has happened, that all the gains that we have made for the workers, they can be negated by the stroke of a political pen. Eric Williams was negated. And therefore, in order that the workers should advance, the workers must form a political party. And that's how the ULF came into being.
For the Black Power, revolution in the 1970s, the sugar workers took part in that.
Yeah. I marched with the contingent that was coming down to Cuba from Chaguanas. I met them in Chaguanas and marched down with them to Cuba, where we held public meetings and so on.
Why do you think it was important that, the sugar workers also participate in Black Power?
When I what?
Why do you think it was important for sugar workers to also participate in Black Power movement?
Because this country can only prosper if we unite. It can only prosper if we unite.
Okay, let's take one more
You
question.
see, if you divide a country on the grounds of race, you know what you're doing? Your most valuable resource in the development of a nation is your human resource. And therefore, when you divide a country in two, you divide your human resource in two. You are less, therefore, equipped. And the same thing with women. When we ignore women, their rights, and women's capacity to be part of our human resource, we are hurting the country. So the point about it is uniting the human resource across racial lines, across gender lines, and so on, and getting your best people at the top doing the job. Unfortunately, over the years, that has not happened.
Okay. We can take one more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I had a question there, if that's okay. Maybe we could take two more?
We can take two more.
His Excellency, High Commissioner, Dr. Panday, Dr. Mahis. I'm sitting down here and I'm listening to what is being said, and I'm very much amazed. But one of the things that we have to understand is, of course, memories are what form the foundation for the future. So in looking towards the future as well, economic diversification is one of the areas that we really need to be heading down, especially as our economy begins to suffer more and more with dependence on oil and gas. And one of the things that I look at India is, of course, their rich cultural sector, right? And I'm talking specifically about Bollywood here, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I know that you have a degree in economics and a degree also in drama that a lot of people don't know about. So in that line of thought, my question would be, what can we learn in terms of our cultural sector, the diversification of our cultural sector, especially our arts and our theater, even our carnival? What can we learn from India in that regard?
We should embrace all cultural expressions. We shouldn't discriminate against any. And the greater the variety of cultural expressions in a country, surely the happier the country is. So you don't deny anyone their cultural expression. You add it to the sum total of the culture of the country. You don't separate it. You don't discriminate against it. You put it into the pool of happiness of your country. That's how I see it. But in Trinidad, because of the racial division, and I'll tell you something, there was a time when the Indians and Africans in Trinidad used to get along very well. Do not forget that the division between the country was a deliberate attempt to keep them apart so that they could be ruled. The old British system of divide and rule. So that the race in the country really was exacerbated by the leaders of industry and later by the politicians.
Okay, one last question.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to ask whether you had ever taken a dip in the waters of the Ganga. I'm asking you that because taking a dip in the waters of Ganga Ma can actually completely change your life.
I wish I had. No, the opportunity did not arise, but I would love to. Merely for the sentimental value of having done so.
Okay, so Mr. Pandey, I want to ask you one last question, and I want to go right back to you growing up in St. Julian Village in Princestown. When you were growing up, did you see any kind of racism? How did that society live that you grew up in?
No, there was no racism in the villages because the village was small and everybody participated in everybody's function. The village in which I live, St. Julian, there was a Baptist church, and the Baptist church, there was pond in which they would come to baptize there. And the whole village would come out to witness the ceremony and so on. And when there is an Indian wedding, everybody would come out. People of all races, and they were basically Indians and people of Indian and African descent and so on. And there wasn't this competition for power. And that is what is causing the problem in Trinidad and Tobago, the competition for power. And we didn't exist in the villages. We lived quite happily.
So, as we close, what is your final message to the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
God help all you.
Okay. And on that note, sir, I want to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us here today, for so graciously answering our questions. Thank you for helping us to record and preserve, this part of history, because this is the preservation of history. This will be recorded and it will be made available to anyone, especially to the younger generation, so that they can learn from you and from all the others who, have so much to teach us. So thank you so very much for honoring us by being here today, for honoring the memories of our ancestors, and for celebrating that legacy that came from India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
And I will pass you over to Asha. You can remain seated.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Mahesh and Dr. Pandey, for this enlightening session. Most of all, thank you to the audience for your questions and comments. This brings us to the end of our program. Tonight has been a pleasure for us at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute to be able to host you. We've actually prepared meals for you. So firstly, I'd like to invite Dr. Pandey and Dr. Mahesh. You can make your way to the refreshments area at the back of the auditorium. And the first two rows, you can join them. So I kindly ask the other persons to be seated, as we like to maintain COVID-19 restrictions while persons are making their way to the refreshments. Okay, so I see a photo session is going to be in progress. The third and fourth rows, you can please make your way to the tables.